The local share market falls again with 80% of stocks going backwards. Westpac reports surprisingly strong results, giving a boost to its share price, and both the Coalition and Labor parties start spending up big. It's Tuesday, the 10th of May, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, before we get into it, I'm going to hijack things just for a very brief moment because I have to mention something.
Yes.
You can tell the business is starting to return to normal in Australia. And this is my own kind of metric for measuring whether business is getting back to normal. Roads are busier. My local commuter car park is chockers every day now. It's hard to get restaurant bookings. But you know, the number one factor that tells me business is going back to normal?
What's that?
Fear and Greed's listener numbers are going through the roof. Last week was our best week we've ever had. The week before that was a record too. Across the slate of Fear and Greed podcasts, at this rate, we will have well in excess of 500,000 downloads just this month.
It is great. Remember when we started a couple of years ago, we always thought we were going to be a commuter product. And of course, COVID hit, and so no one was commuting.
What a time to start a commuter podcast, just when everyone's going into lockdowns.
And everyone else started a podcast back then too, but we maintained it. And I think that's probably part of the reason why our numbers are so big at the moment, Michael. The fact that commuters are back heading into work, and we are the ideal podcast to listen to every morning, I'd say.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and really, there's a message in that for businesses as well. And here's the shameless plug for ourselves here, Sean, that we do have tremendously engaged listeners. They are influential. They are clearly intelligent if they're listening to you and me, Sean.
Yeah.
And basically, if your business wants to talk directly to decision makers in business, then talk to us about a commercial campaign.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with you on that totally, Michael. So if you are interested, head to fearandgreed.com.au and drop us a line.
I couldn't agree more. Look at us in furious agreement with one another about how good Fear and Greed is. What a surprise.
Our colleague Adam Lang will be chuffed that we're doing his job for him. He does all the hard work when it comes to revenue and things like that. He'll hear this morning and be very excited, I think.
Oh, he certainly will. He'll have a great day today. And look, immediately after the show, now seamlessly back on topic now, Sean, you've got a fantastic chat coming up today with Sonia Sadiq Gandhi from the India-Australia Business and Community Alliance.
It's a great chat. Sonia understands the relationship between India and Australia really well, and the free trade deal that's in train, not quite there yet, but certainly in train. We have a chat about that and just the opportunity for Australian businesses in India. Endless.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. But the main story this morning, Sean, is the local market. It fell another 1.2% yesterday, and it's now back to levels of 2 months ago.
Yes, the sell-off continues with investors very, very wary of any bad news whatsoever. There's pessimism across the market, and the S&P ASX 200, which finished at 7,121 points yesterday, is now 6% off its most recent high a few weeks back. Remember, a drop of 10% is considered a bear market. We're not there yet, but we're not that far from it either. Rising inflation and interest rates, the war in Europe, sky-high energy and commodity prices, and fears about the cost of living, not just in Australia, but in most developed nations, are all hurting markets. And some of the sectors that have held stock markets up over the past couple of years, notably tech and healthcare, are struggling to find friends as interest rates rise. A bunch of stocks have hit 12-month lows over the past week. Yesterday was the turn of Aristocrat Leisure, Harvey Norman, Plumbing Group Reece, and Star Entertainment. But none of them were actually the worst performers yesterday. Biotech companies Novonix and Imugene were both down more than 11%. News Corporation fell another 9% after its disappointing results late last week. Almost the best performer yesterday was Westpac. Now, more of that in a moment. Away from the Westpac, the banks fell hard. ANZ and Macquarie Group were both down around 2.7%. Fortescue Metals was down nearly 6%, while Goodman Group was off 7%. About 12 months ago, investors couldn't get enough of Goodman Group. It was a market leader. But in the last 2 weeks, Goodman has dropped 20%. Also, Michael, the Aussie dollar has lost all its momentum after jumping sharply in the middle of last week. It's back to around 70 US cents, mind you, in part because the US dollar is going so well.
You're a cheery fellow this morning, Sean. Have you got any good news for me?
Why wouldn't you want to sell advertising into such an upbeat commentary like that, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Come on, give me something positive to start my Tuesday.
Maybe the sell-off's overdone. That often happens. And Wall Street and European markets are bouncing around quite a bit. Bond yields are rising. That's really the good news. An investor can get a risk-free 10-year bond yielding around 3.5% at the moment. That's not bad, really, because long-term inflation is more likely to be about 2.5%. So risk-free at 3.5% ain't bad. Finally, Michael, bonds look like being a decent investment again. But as we always say, speak to a financial advisor.
There we go. That's why we call you Sean Silver Linings Aylmer. You'll always find one. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Westpac was the latest big bank to announce its half-year earnings, saying it made $3.1 billion in the last half year, and investors certainly liked it, sending Westpac's share price up 3.3%.
Yes, finally some good news for that bank. The bottom line was better than some had expected. Westpac managed to cut costs and had lower bad debts, but its profit margins were squeezed. In consumer banking, earnings went backwards on the back of tough competition in the mortgage market, but in business banking, profits jumped sharply. The institutional bank, which looks after all the really, really big customers, also did well. Westpac announced a higher dividend of 61 cents a share. That represents a yield of 5%, which is well above what investors would get on either a government bond or certainly on a term deposit. Chief Executive Officer Peter King said inflation and higher interest rates would hurt consumer spending, but he was still upbeat about the outlook.
Sean, all the banks seem to be cost-cutting at the moment.
Yes, it's a major focus. In fact, it was a major focus before COVID because it was the best way to improve your bottom line, and that really has flowed through. Over the half year to the end of March, more than 4,000 staff at Westpac lost their jobs and 70 branches were closed. An interesting measure used by the banks is average revenue per employee. After the job cuts, Westpac is at $250,000 average revenue per employee, though that's still well below the Commonwealth Bank, which is at $545,000.
That's a big difference between the two of them.
Yeah, and it just shows how well Commonwealth Bank have done, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now turning to the election campaign, and we are really heading now into the final stretch of the campaign, and the promises seem to be getting bigger, and along with that, more expensive.
That's right. Yesterday, Labor promised $200 million to upgrade Flinders Medical Centre in the marginal Liberal seat of Boothby in South Australia. The state Labor government said it would match the pledge. That means $400 million if Labor is elected federally. Mr Albanese also promised to have a full employment summit. Prime Minister Scott Morrison kept up campaigning on economic management, criticising Labor's spending plans. But his big announcement yesterday was an $8 billion pledge towards helicopters as part of the coalition's Safe and Secure Australia policy. Not surprisingly, he made that announcement in the seat of Gilmore on the New South Wales South Coast, which is held by Labor with a very slim majority. But Andrew Constance, the former New South Wales Member of Parliament, is standing for the coalition there, and I think that the coalition hope to win that one.
Now, John Howard's made another foray into the campaign. He's been really vocal, hasn't he?
He sure has, much more vocal than any other former Prime Minister and not always helpful to the coalition, to be perfectly honest. Yesterday, he was reported as saying the establishment of a nuclear power industry was bound to happen in Australia. Not something that's necessarily popular among the electorate. Both Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese disagreed with John Howard on that one. Staying in the defence area, Scott Morrison also said Australia remains wary of China's plans in the region after the Australian newspaper reported that Beijing wants to build wharves, shipyards and submarine cables in the Solomon Islands. And Michael, finally, 950,000 viewers watched the debate on Sunday night on the Nine network. The network called it a draw, and there were mixed responses yesterday about whether the debate was too emotional. But perhaps most telling was that The Voice and Lego Masters beat it in the ratings.
I love politics, Sean, but it is very hard to beat Lego Masters. That is a fantastic show.
I can't do Lego Masters. I love the voice. In fact, I always cry at the blinds, but I can't do Lego Masters.
Oh, look, you know what? Just give it another go. You can go on 9 now. You can actually just go back and start again with season 1. This is the 4th season.
I know.
You will not see a better show on TV. Well, that's a big call. I don't know if I actually agree with that, but it is a fantastic show.
Fair enough. Leave it there.
All right. Australia, Sean, has recorded its lowest daily COVID-19 death toll this year with just 3 deaths in New South Wales.
It's nice to be reporting some good COVID news. Across the country yesterday, there were 37,807 new cases reported, with Western Australia leading the way with 10,400 infections. Victoria recorded over 10,000 cases, followed by New South Wales with just under 8,000 cases. There are 3,139 people in hospital at the moment, and 129 of them are in intensive care.
Sean, no surprise here, but we have another update on the Star Entertainment Group, and the group's finally taken some action, putting its high roller rebate program on hold.
Well, at least while it deals with probity and tax issues revealed in the current public inquiry into its Sydney casino. The Star wrongly allowed at least 12 gamblers to play as international rebate players, meaning they paid lower gambling duties, as a result of either mistakes or poor practices, according to the inquiry. Also, the group has allegedly unpaid state taxes of at least $2.5 million in New South Wales. In a statement, the board of the Star said it had resolved to suspend rebate programs for both domestic and international players across all its casinos. The Star also appointed interim managers to several senior positions after a bunch of resignations late last week. And meanwhile, Michael, the first board member, appeared before the inquiry yesterday. Richard Shepherd, the chair of Dexus and former boss of Macquarie Bank, accepted that the board is responsible for setting a firm's culture. That actually contradicts the comments of former CEO Matt Becker last week. The inquiry continues, and I'm sure will provide plenty of news in coming days.
Oh, I'm sure it will. Sean, Magellan Financial Group, which has had a pretty hard time of it lately, has sold its interest in Mexican fast food franchise Guzman y Gomez.
Yes, and for a nice return as well. Now, I'm not quite sure why Magellan was ever in Guzman.
It doesn't feel like a very natural fit, does it?
It's a fund manager. Yeah, I don't understand. But in any case, Chair Hamish Mulcanen yesterday said the sale shows the group's confidence in its strategy to focus on core funds management. Or maybe another way of looking at that, it shows its strategy to get out of the stuff that's not core to its business. Magellan will receive $140 million for the 11.6% stake. When I saw that, I thought, wow, Guzman y Gomez is worth more than $1 billion. Pretty incredible, really. Anyway, Magellan's share price fell 9% yesterday. It had been performing better in recent weeks. Remember, it had lost 75% in value since last June till March. It had picked up quite a bit, but big tumble yesterday.
Sean, TPG Telecom has sold its mobile tower and rooftop infrastructure network to a Canadian pension fund.
It becomes the third telco behind Telstra and Singtel to sell its tower business to a pension fund, and it will receive $950 million for the asset. The big super funds like the reliable long-term income from the infrastructure assets. The Canadian buyer, OMER, O-M-E-R, already has interests in the Port of Melbourne, Transgrid and local renewable energy developer FRV Australia. TPG's share price rose 2.3% yesterday. A very good effort given what the market did.
And a couple of quick, smaller stories. Sean, tech billionaire and owner of 11.3% of AGL Energy shares, Mike Cannon-Brookes, reckons the proposed demerger of the group would ensure the energy giant remains the country's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases because it will retire coal power stations up to 10 years too late.
That's right. Shareholders vote on the demerger in the middle of next month. Late last week, AGL Chair Peter Botten urged shareholders to make their decision on facts, not rhetoric, and this was Mr. Cannon-Brookes' response. So even though the federal election is over in 2 weeks, we've still got the AGL shareholder vote going on for another couple of weeks. Anyway, Michael, also a final one, insurance and underwriting group AUB will buy a UK-based insurance broker for $880 million.
All right, moving on to overseas news, Sean, and Chinese exports and imports struggled last month with the zero-tolerance COVID policy really slowing the world's second-largest economy.
And this, of course, is very important to the Australian economy. Beijing's efforts to eliminate COVID is now arguably the second biggest risk to the global economic outlook, more so than the war in Europe and energy prices. Now, of course, inflation and higher interest rates is the biggest risk. Export growth in China last month fell from 15% to just 4%, while imports were flat. While government officials insist that China will grow 5.5% this year, economists don't believe that can occur unless the COVID policy is changed. And there's no sign of that whatsoever. Shanghai and many other districts remain in strict lockdown, and certain things such as food deliveries in Shanghai won't be allowed from next week either.
And Sean, Filipinos began voting yesterday in a national election that pits the offspring of two of their leading political dynasties against a progressive candidate.
Yes, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., better known as Bong Bong Marcos, and his running mate Sarah Duterte, the daughter of the current leader, hold a commanding lead over their rival Leni Robredo, the incumbent vice president. A win for Marcos would mark the political rehabilitation of a family that presided over one of Asia's most notorious dictatorships.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary story, that one. Now, Sean, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview, and today you're speaking with Sonia Sadiq Gandhi.
Yes, we mentioned this at the top of the show. Sonia is very knowledgeable about the trade relationship between Australia and India. And I think what I got out of the interview more than anything was just the opportunity, both ways, for trade going both ways. Also, she had some great practical advice about if you're interested in doing business in India, who to call, what to do. Great interview.
Yeah, it really is. It's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 10th of May, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Or if you'd like to get in touch, head to our website, fearandgreed.com.au. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.